Ben sat across from his lawyer, his hands shaking slightly. The room felt too quiet, like the walls were listening. Ben, Max said gently, folding his hands on the table, you're being charged with kidnapping and exploitation of Vin. This is serious. I need the full truth. Ben swallowed hard. I never meant to hurt anyone, I couldn't walk away. Max raised an eyebrow. Explain. Ben leaned forward, his voice cracking. Victoria is not well, she's an adult but she's mentally challenged, she needs 24/7 care, structure, safety, someone who actually sees her. Max stayed silent, letting him talk. Her biological family doesn't take care of her right, Ben continued. They leave her alone for hours, they forget her meds, they scream at her when she has accidents, they don't understand her regression or her fear, to them she's a burden. Max sighed, and you believe you were the only one who could help her? Yes, Ben said firmly. I made sure she ate, I bathed her when she couldn't do it herself. I changed her when she was overwhelmed and scared, I put her to bed when she cried at night. She felt safe with me for the first time in her life. Max tapped his pen against the folder. But the law doesn't care about intentions, it cares about consent and process. Ben's shoulders slumped. I know, I should have gone through the courts, I should have reported her family, but every night I waited she got worse. She regressed more, she stopped speaking, she clung to me like I was the only solid thing in her world. Max looked at him carefully. You're saying this wasn't exploitation, this was caregiving. Yes, Ben said quietly, she needs help, real help, not punishment for being different. Max closed the file. Then that's the angle we fight from, but understand this, Ben, caring for someone doesn't give you ownership over them, the court will decide what's best for Victoria, not you. Ben nodded, tears in his eyes. I just want her safe, even if that's not with me. For the first time, Max softened. That may be the most important thing you've said today. Vin sat in his power chair across from the prosecution table, his hands resting on the armrests. The hum of the chair was the only sound he could control in the room, and right now, that mattered. Jeff stood beside him, calm and grounded, like an anchor. Vin reached into his bag and pulled out 2 folders. These are the IQ tests, Vin said, his voice steady even though his chest felt tight. This one was doctored by David. He slid the first folder across the table. And this is the real one. The prosecutor flipped through the papers slowly, his expression darkening as he compared the results. You're sure about this? The prosecutor asked. Vin nodded. I didn't even know the first one was fake at the time, neither did Ben. David controlled all of it. The prosecutor exhaled sharply. This changes a lot. Vin shifted slightly in his chair, the movement small but deliberate. I need to say something else. Everyone turned toward him. I don't want to go to court, Vin said. I really don't want to see him. I know Ben didn't know anything about the IQ test because I didn't know anything either, but that doesn't make the nightmare stop. His voice wavered just a little now. I still wake up thinking he's there, I still hear his voice, being in the same room with him. Vin shook his head. I can't do that. The room was quiet. Jeff crouched slightly so he was at Vin's eye level. You might have to talk about what happened to you, he said gently, but you don't have to stay if you don't want to. We can ask for accommodations, video testimony, closed court, breaks whenever you need them. Vin looked at him, searching his face. So I still get a choice. Yes, Jeff said firmly, what happened to you doesn't take your power away, not now, not ever. Vin let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Okay, he said softly, then I'll tell the truth just in a way that keeps me safe. Jeff nodded. That's exactly how this should work. Vin's fingers curled slightly on the armrest, not in fear this time, but in resolve. For once, the system was bending toward him instead of forcing him to bend for it. And that felt like real justice. Max stood in the hallway outside the holding room, 2 files spread open in his hands. His jaw tightened as he compared the pages again. Shit, he muttered. Ben looked up from the bench, confusion written all over his face. What? Max turned the folder so Ben could see. These are Vin's IQ tests, both of them. Ben frowned. IQ tests. Max's eyes snapped up. Are you sure you don't or didn't know anything about an IQ test? Ben shook his head immediately. No, no one ever told me there was testing, Vin never mentioned it and I sure as hell didn't request one, what are you talking about? Max exhaled slowly then tapped the first file. This one says Vin's cognitive functioning is severely impaired, that he lacks decision-making capacity, that he needs a guardian. Ben's stomach dropped, that's not right. Max flipped to the second file. Because this one, the real one, says something very different, mild developmental delay, fully capable of understanding consent, trauma responses misread as regression. Ben stared at the papers, his hands curling into fists. So someone lied. Not just lied, Max said grimly, they manipulated clinical evidence. Ben swallowed. Who did this? Max closed the folders and said the name carefully like it carried weight. Dr. David McGrath, forensic psych. Ben's face went pale. That bastard. If a forensic psychiatrist doctored records, Max continued, then this isn't just about you anymore. This becomes professional misconduct, evidence tampering, and coercive control. Ben looked up, eyes burning. You're saying he built the whole narrative? Yes, Max said, and if Vin didn't know and you didn't know, then intent shifts, hard. Ben leaned back against the wall, shaking his head. He used paperwork to take Vin's voice away. Max nodded, and now that paperwork is what gives it back. There was a long pause. Ben finally said quietly, does this help Vin? Max met his eyes. It does more than help, it explains, and courts listen when doctors start eating their own. Ben closed his eyes, a mix of relief and anger crashing together. Then burn it down, he said, for Vin. Max gave a thin, determined smile. Already started. Max pulled Jeff aside near the conference room, keeping his voice low. Ben feels awful, Max said. After I told him about the IQ test, it really hit him. He wants to apologize to Victoria. Jeff didn't hesitate. His name is Vin, Jeff said flatly, and he doesn't want to be anywhere near your client. Max stiffened slightly. I understand, but Ben genuinely. I don't care, Jeff cut in, calm but unmovable. Vin isn't responsible for Ben's closure, he's not here to make anyone feel better. Jeff crossed his arms. Vin wants to get this over with and move forward. That means no meetings, no apologies, no last conversations. Max exhaled, even if the apology is sincere. Especially then, Jeff said, sincere apologies still reopen wounds. Vin's boundaries are not negotiable. There was a beat of silence. Max nodded slowly. All right, I'll tell Ben no contact. Good, Jeff said, because the only thing Vin owes anyone in this building is the truth, and he's already given that. Max glanced back toward the hallway where Vin had been earlier. He's stronger than people think. Jeff's expression softened just a fraction. He always was, people just kept trying to decide that for him. Max gave a small nod. Then let's finish this clean. Jeff turned back toward the courtroom doors. That's the plan. And for the first time since the case began, the path forward was clear, not centered on guilt or apologies but on Vin's right to peace. Vin's power chair hummed softly as they moved through the courthouse hallway. The building felt too big, too loud even when it was quiet. His shoulders were tense, his hands gripping the armrests. John, Vin said quietly, his voice tight, I don't like being in courthouses. John didn't rush him, he stepped closer, keeping his tone calm. I know, buddy, just breathe for a second. Your bear is right behind you in your diaper bag, okay? If you need it, it's there. Vin nodded, grounding himself just knowing it was close. Jeff approached them then, holding a folder. All right, guys, we talked to the judge. You'll be able to give your testimony without seeing Ben's separate room, camera only if you agree. Vin swallowed, his chest felt heavy. I changed my mind, Vin said suddenly. John looked at him right away. That's okay, you don't have to see Ben tomorrow if you don't want to, we can stop this right now. Vin shook his head slowly. No, not that. He looked up at Jeff. I'll do it, but I'll be looking at you the whole time. Jeff knelt slightly so he was at eye level. That's completely fine, I'll be right there. If you get overwhelmed, we pause. If you want to stop, we stop. This only happens on your terms. Vin nodded, I understand. There was a long pause, then Vin's voice came out steadier than before. But I want him to see what he did to me. The words hung in the air, not angry, not loud, just firm. John's expression softened, pride and worry mixed together. Okay, he said gently, then we'll be right here the whole time. Jeff straightened, his voice calm but resolute. Then we'll make sure the court hears your voice, not a report, not a doctored test, you. Vin took a breath, his fingers brushing the edge of the diaper bag behind him. For the first time in that building, he wasn't just surviving the moment. He was choosing it. Ben caught sight of Vin as soon as he entered the room. Vin was in his power chair, John standing close behind him, Jeff at his side. He looked different than Ben remembered, smaller somehow but steadier, grounded. Ben's breath hitched. I am sorry, Ben blurted out, I'm sorry. The words came out fast, desperate. Vin, I'm so sorry. Vin didn't turn. He didn't flinch. Instead, he kept talking quietly to John and Jeff, his eyes focused straight ahead, as if the sound hadn't even reached him. John, Vin said softly, can you stay right there? I'm not moving, John replied immediately. Vin nodded, then looked to Jeff, I'm ready when you are. Ben stood frozen, the apology hanging uselessly in the air. Jeff straightened and turned sharply toward Max. Max, Jeff said, his voice calm but edged with steel, get your client out of here, now, so I can talk to mine. Max didn't argue. One look at Vin, composed, unshaken, deliberately refusing engagement, told him everything he needed to know. Ben, Max said quietly, placing a hand on his arm, we're leaving. Ben hesitated, his eyes still locked on Vin. I just wanted him to know. He does, Max said firmly, and that's enough. As they were led away, Ben looked back one last time. Vin still didn't look at him. Only when the door closed did Vin's shoulders relax a fraction. Jeff turned back to him, you did exactly what you needed to do. Vin let out a slow breath, I didn't want his words to take up space in my head. John gave a small nod, pride clear in his voice, they didn't. Jeff met Vin's eyes, that's what boundaries look like, and the court saw it. Vin rested his hands on the armrests, steady again. For once, silence wasn't weakness. It was power. Judge Pat settled into his chair and looked out over the room, his expression firm but not unkind. All right, he said evenly, let us begin. The room went still. Jeff stepped slightly closer to Vin, just enough for Vin to see him without turning his head. John remained behind the power chair, a quiet presence, solid and grounding. Judge Pat's gaze rested on Vin. Vin, I want you to know something before we start. This is your testimony, you set the pace. If you need a break, if you feel overwhelmed, you say the word and we stop. Do you understand? Vin nodded, yes, Your Honor. You do not have to look at anyone you don't want to, Judge Pat continued. You may speak to me, to your advocate, or to the record. Vin took a breath, steadying himself. I'll be looking at Jeff. That's perfectly acceptable, the judge said. He glanced briefly toward the defense table, then back to Vin. The court also recognizes the accommodations requested and granted, no interruptions, no direct address from the defendant. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor, came from both sides. Judge Pat folded his hands. Then when you're ready, Vin, you may tell the court what happened, in your own words. Vin's fingers curled once, then relaxed. I want to say this first, Vin said, his voice quiet but firm. What happened to me wasn't confusion, it wasn't my disability, it was control. The courtroom leaned in, listening. Judge Pat nodded once, go on. And for the first time, Vin wasn't being spoken about. He was being heard. Vin kept his eyes on Jeff, his voice steady even as his hands trembled slightly in his lap. Benjamin thought that I had a low IQ, Vin said, and so did I. There was a quiet shift in the courtroom. I believed it because that's what I was told, over and over, Vin continued, but I didn't have a low IQ, I had trauma. He paused, swallowing. When you're scared all the time, when you're being controlled, when you're told you can't understand things, you start to act smaller, you stop trusting your own thoughts. Vin took a breath and went on. Benjamin didn't cause the trauma at first, he said carefully, but he made it so much worse. He treated me like I couldn't think for myself, like I needed permission to exist. Judge Pat leaned forward slightly, listening closely. I wasn't confused, Vin said, I was surviving. The words landed hard. Jeff didn't interrupt, he didn't need to. Vin was clear, grounded, present. Judge Pat nodded once. "Thank you, Vin," he said. "Please continue when you're ready." Vin exhaled, shoulders easing just a bit. "For a long time," he added quietly, "I thought something was wrong with me. Now I know what was wrong was what was done to me." The courtroom stayed silent, not because there was nothing to say, but because no one dared interrupt the truth. Jeff stood beside Vin, his tone calm but protective. "Vin, are you transgender?" Vin shook his head. "No, I'm dealing with my childhood trauma from an old caregiver, and for that, Benjamin helped me deal with it the right way. But I used to play with myself when I was getting a diaper change." Jeff's brow furrowed slightly, careful with his words. "So, you played with yourself as you were getting changed to cope with your trauma." Vin looked down for a moment, then back up. "In a way, yes." Jeff nodded, then addressed the court. "No further questions." Matt stood from the defense table. "Vin or Victoria?" Jeff immediately objected. "Objection, Your Honor, my client wants to be known as Vin." Judge Pat banged his gavel lightly. "Matt, in my courtroom, Vin wants to be known as Vin. Use that name." Matt held up his hands. "Sorry, Your Honor, Vin, why didn't you tell him or call the police?" Vin's fingers tightened on the armrests. "I didn't have access to a phone and I am legally blind." Matt leaned forward, trying another angle. "And your seizures, have they stopped since you were with Benjamin?" Vin nodded slowly. "Yes, but..." "Do you have anything further?" Matt pressed. Vin shook his head. Judge Pat cut in firmly. "No more questions." The courtroom fell silent. Vin exhaled, steadying himself. He had spoken his truth. Jeff leaned slightly toward Vin. "You did exactly what you needed to do. Nothing more was required." Vin's shoulders eased for the first time in the morning. He had control. He had boundaries. And for the first time in court, he was being heard exactly as he wanted. Ben was sworn in and took the stand. He looked smaller there, hands folded tightly in front of him, eyes fixed straight ahead. Matt approached slowly. "Benjamin," Matt said, "had you ever known about, requested, or heard anything regarding an IQ test performed on Vin?" Ben shook his head immediately. "No." Matt paused. "Explain." "When I first met Vin," Ben said, choosing his words carefully, "I was given background information by his former therapist, Dr. David McGrath, and by his past caregiver, Liam, who has since passed away. That information shaped what I thought I understood about Vin." Matt nodded, "And that information included cognitive limitations." "Yes," Ben admitted, "that's what I was told." "But you personally never ordered an IQ test?" "No." "You never saw the raw testing process?" "No." "You were only given results?" "That's correct." Matt picked up a document and held it up slightly. "So to be clear, you have no knowledge of a doctored IQ test?" Ben met his eyes. "No, I did not." Matt let the silence sit for a moment, then nodded. "No further questions." There was a quiet shift in the room. Jeff stood for cross-examination. "Benjamin," he said calmly, "you trusted the word of Dr. McGrath and the late caregiver Liam, correct?" "Yes." "And based on that trust, you treated Vin as someone with significantly reduced capacity?" Ben's jaw tightened. "Yes." Jeff nodded once. "Even though you never verified the testing yourself?" "No," Ben said quietly. Jeff turned slightly toward the judge. "No further questions, Your Honor." Judge Pat looked down at his notes, then back up at Ben, his expression unreadable. "Thank you," the judge said. "You may step down." As Ben left the stand, Vin did not look at him. But the truth had already been placed on the record, clear, documented, and impossible to undo. And the courtroom knew exactly where the manipulation began. Matt stood and turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, the defense has arranged a Zoom call with Dr. David McGrath." Judge Pat nodded once. "Proceed." Matt gestured toward the screen mounted at the front of the courtroom. "If everyone would please look at the television." The screen flickered, then stabilized. Dr. David McGrath appeared on the screen, seated in a stark room. The walls were bare, institutional. A medical bed was visible behind him, along with safety rails. He was in a wheelchair, his posture stiff. Matt addressed the court. "For the record, Dr. McGrath is currently residing in a secured group home facility. The court has ordered this placement to ensure his care needs are met as he is wheelchair-bound while also serving his custodial sentence. A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Vin stayed focused on Jeff, not the screen. Judge Pat leaned forward slightly. "Dr. McGrath, can you hear us?" "Yes," McGrath replied, his voice thin but clear. "You understand you are under oath," the judge said. "I do." Matt began. "Dr. McGrath, did you ever administer an IQ test to Vin?" McGrath hesitated. "I reviewed testing." Matt's eyes narrowed. "Did you administer it?" "No," McGrath admitted. "I interpreted results provided to me." "Provided by whom?" Matt asked. McGrath shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "By my office, by staff." Jeff stood slowly. "Your Honor, may I?" Judge Pat nodded. "Go ahead." Jeff's voice was calm, precise. "Dr. McGrath, are you aware that two versions of Vin's IQ test exist in the record?" McGrath swallowed. "I am now." "One indicating severe impairment," Jeff continued, "and one indicating mild developmental delay with trauma-related presentation." "Yes." "Which one did you sign off on?" The pause was long. "The first," McGrath said quietly. "The doctored one," Jeff clarified. McGrath didn't answer. Judge Pat's voice cut through the silence. "Answer the question, doctor." "Yes," McGrath said, "the doctored one." The courtroom went still. Jeff didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. "And you understood," he said, "that this document would be used to justify control over Vin's autonomy." McGrath looked down. "Yes." Vin's hand tightened on the armrest, but he didn't look away. Judge Pat spoke, his tone firm and final. "The record will reflect this admission." He turned back to the screen. "Dr. McGrath, this court will be referring your testimony to the medical board and the district attorney for additional charges." The screen remained on McGrath's face as the weight of that landed. Vin finally exhaled. Not relief, not joy. "Closure." Jeff stepped forward, his voice controlled but firm. "Dr. McGrath," he said, "you and Vin were friends, is that correct?" David McGrath nodded on the screen. "Yes." A quiet ripple moved through the room. "Then explain this," Jeff continued. "Why would you or your team doctor documents and place Vin with a family that hurt my client?" McGrath's jaw tightened. He hesitated, then answered plainly, "Because his parents were paying me a fortune." The words landed hard. Jeff didn't flinch, so money mattered more than Vin's safety. McGrath didn't respond. Jeff pressed on, "And like Mr. Benjamin testified earlier, you also claimed Vin was transgender, correct?" Matt shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor." Judge Pat raised his hand immediately. "Sustained. The jury will disregard Mr. Jeff's last remark." Jeff nodded once. "Understood, Your Honor." He turned slightly back toward the screen. "No further questions." Judge Pat looked at McGrath, his expression cold. "Dr. McGrath, you may remain available for further proceedings." The screen went dark. Vin stayed focused on Jeff, steady and quiet. The damage was done. The truth was on the record, not speculation, not confusion, but motive. "Money." And the court had heard it loud and clear. Matt rose again. "Your Honor, the defense calls Samantha Smith to the stand." The name echoed in the room. Vin's breath caught, his hands tightened on the armrests of his power chair. "Jeff," Vin whispered, his voice shaking just a little, "did he call my mom?" Jeff turned to him immediately, lowering his voice so only Vin could hear. "Hey, look at me." Vin did. "It's going to be okay," Jeff said steadily. "You're safe. She can't say anything that changes the truth, and if this gets overwhelming, we stop, remember that." Vin swallowed and nodded, still watching Jeff like an anchor. John stepped a little closer behind the chair, a silent reminder that Vin wasn't alone. Judge Pat glanced toward Vin, then back to the attorneys. "The court reminds all parties that this testimony will remain within scope and respectful of the witness and the victim." "Yes, Your Honor," Matt said. Jeff's voice stayed calm but firm. "And for the record, any attempt to intimidate or re-traumatize my client will be met with immediate objection." Judge Pat nodded once, duly noted. Vin took a slow breath. The door opened for the next witness. Whatever came next, Vin wasn't facing it by himself. Matt faced the witness stand. Ms. Smith, how long have you known Vin, your own child? Vin looked down, his chest tightening. Slowly, he pulled out a folded page from his bag, notes he had written about his childhood in the group home. His hands shook as he passed it back to Jeff. Jeff took it without comment and placed it gently into his folder. Sam cleared her throat. I've known Vin his whole life, but I know what you're really asking is why I placed him in a group home. Matt lifted an eyebrow, so not his whole life. Jeff stood, objection. Judge Pat glanced up, overruled, the witness may answer. Sam took a breath. I placed Vin in a group home because I thought I couldn't handle raising a disabled child. I was overwhelmed, I didn't think I was capable. The room was quiet. Matt nodded slowly. And later, after you were reunited with Vin, you allowed your second child to take care of your first child. Sam stiffened. John is an adult, he can make his own decisions. Matt stepped closer to the jury. Run his own life, including taking care of his older brother, even though my client has worked in group homes for 12 years, caring for people with disabilities. Jeff rose again, objection argumentative. Judge Pat raised a hand, sustained, rephrase, Mr. Matt. Matt nodded once. Ms. Smith, did you believe John, who had just become an adult, was more capable of supporting Vin than trained professionals? Sam hesitated. I believed family mattered. Matt didn't press further, no more questions. Jeff stood for redirect. Ms. Smith, he said calmly, did you ever visit Vin regularly while he was in the group home? Sam looked down, not as much as I should have. And did you investigate reports of harm or neglect while he was there? Silence. Judge Pat leaned forward slightly. Ms. Smith, you are required to answer. No, Sam said quietly, I didn't. Jeff nodded once, no further questions. Vin kept his eyes on Jeff, breathing slowly. The words hurt, but they were out in the open now, written down, heard. Judge Pat looked over the courtroom. The record will reflect this testimony. For Vin, it wasn't vindication. But it was truth. And truth was finally staying on his side. Matt stood again, redirect, Your Honor. Judge Pat nodded, proceed. Matt turned back to the witness stand. Ms. Smith, about a year ago, before the doctored IQ tests were revealed, there was a custody hearing involving Vin. Do you remember that? Yes, Sam said. And during that hearing, Matt continued, Vin had a seizure in the courtroom. Is that correct? Sam shifted in her seat. Yes. Matt's voice stayed even. When that happened, did you help Vin or did my client Benjamin? Sam rolled her eyes slightly. Benjamin did. There was a visible reaction in the room. Matt pressed on, and who stopped the proceedings so Vin could be helped, you or Benjamin? Sam hesitated. Benjamin. Matt nodded once, letting that sit. One more thing, he said. Do you and your family still give Vin the same medication that Benjamin gave him, even though that medication makes Vin sleepy? Yes, Sam answered quietly, we do. Matt closed his folder, no further questions. The silence afterward was heavy. Judge Pat looked down at his notes, then back up at the witness. His expression was unreadable but not neutral. Vin kept his eyes on Jeff, his breathing steady. The answers hurt, but they also confirmed something important. Even now, the truth kept surfacing, not through emotion, but through facts no one could undo. Jeff leaned slightly toward Vin and murmured, You're doing great, just stay with me. Vin nodded. The court had heard enough. And it showed. Defense closing argument. Matt stood and buttoned his jacket, taking a measured breath before addressing the court. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, this case is not simple, it never was. He paced slowly. Benjamin is not a predator hiding behind paperwork. He is a caregiver who relied on information provided by licensed professionals, Dr. David McGrath and a former caregiver, information we now know was false. Matt gestured toward the exhibits. The doctored IQ test did not come from Benjamin, he did not order it, he did not know it existed. He turned slightly toward Vin, careful not to address him directly. When Vin had seizures, Benjamin intervened. When Vin was overwhelmed, Benjamin provided structure, routine, and care. Even today, Vin remains on the same medication regimen because it helped stabilize him. Matt paused. Was every decision perfect? No, but mistakes are not crimes. This case, he concluded, is about manipulation, and the evidence shows that manipulation began with a professional who abused his authority, not with Benjamin. Matt returned to his seat. Prosecution closing argument, Jeff. Jeff rose slowly. He didn't pace, he didn't raise his voice. He spoke to the jury the way you speak when the truth is already in the room. This case is not about whether Benjamin is evil, Jeff said. It is about whether he crossed a line. He held up the 2 IQ test reports. These documents stole Vin's voice. One was real, one was fake, and both were used to justify control over an adult with disabilities. Jeff looked directly at the jury. Benjamin may not have ordered the forgery, but he benefited from it. He accepted it without verification. He acted on it. He let that sit. Care is not ownership, protection is not isolation, and helping someone does not give you the right to decide their life for them. Jeff's tone sharpened slightly. Vin told you he wasn't confused, he was traumatized. He told you he didn't have access to a phone, he told you he is legally blind. And when he had a seizure in this very courtroom, the system failed him again. Jeff gestured toward Vin, not accusing, just acknowledging. Yet despite all of that, Vin came here, he spoke, he chose to be seen. Jeff finished quietly. Justice here is not about punishment alone, it's about restoring autonomy, about saying clearly and finally that disabled adults still have the right to their own voice. He nodded once. We ask you to return a verdict that reflects that truth. Judge Pat looked out over the courtroom. The case will now be submitted, he said. The jury will deliberate. Vin exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on Jeff. Whatever happened next, the truth had already been spoken out loud. And that mattered. They were seated in the quiet side room now, the noise of the courtroom muted behind thick walls. John leaned closer to Vin's power chair. Hey, how do you feel after all of this? Vin didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed forward, unfocused but steady. I'll let you know, Vin said finally, when the jury verdict comes in. John nodded. He didn't push, he knew better. Sam shifted awkwardly near the doorway. Vin, John, I'm sorry. Vin turned his head then, not angry, just tired. Mom, Vin said plainly, I know you don't want to hear this, but we all know Ben is a fucking narcissist. He'll try anything to make himself look good in this situation. Sam flinched slightly. So I already knew he'd do this, Vin continued. I wasn't surprised, I just needed the court to see it too. The room went quiet. John rested a hand lightly on Vin's shoulder. You handled it better than anyone could have. Vin exhaled slowly. I didn't come here for apologies, I came here so it would stop. Sam nodded, tears in her eyes, but she didn't interrupt this time. Outside, the jury was deliberating. Inside, Vin had already said what he needed to say. Now all that was left was the verdict. Jeff stepped into the room holding the small envelope from the jury clerk. His voice was calm but firm. Guys, he said, they have a verdict. Vin straightened slightly in his power chair. That's good, right? He asked, trying to force optimism. Jeff shook his head gently. Vin, don't get your hopes up just yet. John frowned. Why not? Because, Jeff said, it could go either way at this point. The jury has heard everything, but we don't control what they decide. Vin's fingers tightened on the armrests. He's guilty, I don't have my guy part. His voice carried that same blunt, raw certainty only Vin could have, the weight of all the manipulation and trauma he had endured. Jeff crouched slightly, meeting Vin's eyes. Calm down, buddy, we don't know anything yet. Until they say it out loud, nothing is final. Vin let out a shaky breath, trying to steady himself. But I know what he did, I felt it every day. John rested a hand lightly on Vin's shoulder. And that matters, Vin, that's why you came here, the jury will see it too. Jeff nodded. Exactly, right now we wait, and whatever happens, we're right here with you. Vin exhaled slowly, the hum of his power chair the only sound in the quiet room. Outside, the jury deliberated. Inside, Vin braced himself for the moment that would either bring closure or stretch the anxiety a little longer. The jury filed back into the courtroom, the hum of anticipation filling the air. Vin gripped the armrests of his power chair tightly, his knuckles white. Judge Pat cleared his throat. Members of the jury, have you reached a verdict? The jury foreperson stood. Yes, Your Honor, we find Benjamin Vatino not guilty. Vin's chest tightened, his eyes widened. No, 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 he whispered, voice cracking. Jeff immediately stepped closer, his tone calm but urgent. Vin, come down, you're safe, just breathe. Vin shook his head, refusing to look away. Jeff turned to Judge Pat. Your Honor, can my client get a restraining order against Benjamin? Judge Pat's face was stern. Vin needs care, your young brother John needs his own life. This court cannot remove Benjamin from the home at this time. Jeff's voice rose slightly. Your Honor, what are you doing? Vin's voice rang out, small but firm. Your Honor, please, I don't want to go home with Ben. The courtroom went silent, the weight of his words hung heavy. Judge Pat's face softened slightly, but he shook his head. Vin, I don't want to do this either. Vin leaned forward in his chair. Then don't. Judge Pat's gavel hit the desk sharply. Vin Smith, you are going home with Benjamin Vatino. Jeff's eyes flared. Your Honor, this isn't right. Judge Pat's voice became icy. Don't make me hold you in contempt for disruption of court. He banged the gavel again, the echo reverberating through the courtroom. Vin slumped slightly, the world narrowing to the harsh sound of wood on desk and the reality of what had just been decided. John placed a hand on Vin's shoulder, gentle but grounding. Hey, I'm here, you're not alone, he said softly. Jeff leaned down, his jaw tight. We'll figure out the next steps, I promise you, Vin, we're not giving up. Vin exhaled, trembling, eyes still fixed forward. He had fought to be heard, he had spoken his truth. And yet the court had chosen otherwise. Ben stepped forward, voice smooth and cold. Victoria, let's go. Vin's head snapped up, eyes blazing. Fuck you, Ben. His voice carried every ounce of anger and fear he'd held in for years. Before anyone could react, Ben moved quickly to Vin's power chair. His hands were on the attendant controller, the device that gave him full control over Vin's movement. Stop, Jeff shouted, but Ben ignored him. Vin struggled, trying to push back against the controls, but the chair obeyed Ben instantly. Panic surged through him. John, Vin yelled, voice cracking, do something. John leapt forward, but Ben's grip was fast and precise. With a flick of the controller, the chair jerked forward. The wheels rolled over the polished courthouse floor, the sound echoing sharply through the silent courtroom. Vin's heart raced, his chest tightened. His world was moving without him, his power stripped away in seconds. Jeff's voice cut through the chaos, firm and loud. Stop this right now, Benjamin Vatino, you will face immediate contempt. But Ben didn't stop. The chair continued its path toward the exit, Vin screaming, his hands gripping the sides of the chair helplessly. John ran alongside, trying to catch the armrest. Vin, hold on. Vin's eyes darted around the courtroom, the judge, the jury, everyone frozen. Fear and frustration coiled tightly in his chest. He was trapped in the very chair he had relied on for independence, and Ben was driving it, taking him away from everything safe, his home, his family, the people who actually cared for him. The gavel bang from Judge Pat finally rang sharply, louder than ever. Contempt stopped the chair immediately. Vin's teeth clenched, his entire body shook. All he could think was, I need out, I need safety, I need John and Jeff, I need my life back. The courtroom erupted into gasps. Judge Pat's gavel slammed down hard. Benjamin, take Victoria home. Vin froze, the words hitting him like a wall. He didn't want to move. He didn't want to go anywhere with Ben. John's jaw tightened, glaring at Ben, his hands clenching. Judge Pat's voice boomed again, slicing through the chaos. John, Jeff, you two are being held in custody for attempted obstruction of court. Jeff's eyes widened. Your Honor, we were protecting Vin, he shouted. Enough, Judge Pat banged the gavel again. Court security, take them both away immediately. Two officers moved quickly toward John and Jeff. Jeff tried to explain, but the gavel's authority cut him off. Vin's power chair was still under Ben's control. Ben's face was a mask of calm authority as he maneuvered Vin toward the exit. Vin's hands gripped the armrests, knuckles white. John, Jeff, don't leave me, please. John strained against the officers holding him back. Vin, stay strong, we'll fix this, I swear. Jeff shouted, Vin, listen to me, breathe, protect yourself however you can. Ben's chair moved faster, heading straight for the courthouse doors. Vin's heart pounded, fear and anger warring inside him. He had been heard in court, he had fought for justice, and yet now, in a cruel twist, he was being taken away. Judge Pat banged his gavel once more, the echo sharp and final. Order executed, take them both away, court adjourned for today. Vin's chest heaved as the sounds of footsteps and wheels echoed down the hall. He felt the weight of the courthouse behind him, the world outside uncertain, and his own autonomy stripped in an instant. Link stirred awake, rubbing his eyes. "Why is there so much noise?" he asked, voice groggy. Max moved closer, crouching beside him. "It's Vin, he had another nightmare." Link blinked, sitting up straighter. "Another nightmare, poor Vin." Max nodded gently. "Yeah, he's been through a lot, it's normal for him to wake up scared sometimes." Link looked toward Vin's room, worry in his eyes. "Can we help him?" Max smiled softly. "We will, he's safe here, we'll make sure he knows that." From down the hall, faint sounds of Vin's breathing, shaky but slowing, echoed. The group felt the weight of his trauma but also the strength of the care around him. Billy leaned over to Link quietly. "Sometimes just being there helps, Vin knows we're here for him." Link nodded, understanding. "Okay, I'll stay close." Max ruffled his hair lightly. "Good, that's all Vin needs right now, comfort, safety, and people who love him." The room settled into quiet vigilance. Outside, the world continued, but inside, Vin was surrounded by steady, watchful care, ready to guide him back to peace after another terrifying night. The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the window. Vin sat in his power chair, staring out at the world beyond, lost in thought. Billy appeared quietly in the doorway, carrying the tube feed. "I've got your feed ready," he said gently. Vin turned to him and nodded. "Thanks." Billy set it down and hesitated for a moment. "You want to talk about last night?" Vin's gaze stayed on the window. "Why, it's the same nightmare over and over, nothing changes." Billy moved closer, lowering his voice. "You're thinking about Ben and the court where you were supposed to be safe, and then the judge sent you with him anyway, and even called you Victoria." Vin's hands curled slightly on the armrests. "Yeah, that's the one. I want to move on, Dad." Billy kneeled beside him, resting a hand lightly on Vin's arm. "Vin, healing doesn't happen in a day, you can't just flip a switch and it's all gone." Vin let out a shaky sigh. "I know, but I wish it would." Billy gave a soft nod. "I know, and I wish it could be that easy for you, but step by step we'll get there, you're not alone." Vin finally turned his gaze away from the window, meeting Billy's eyes for a moment. The weight of yesterday still lingered, but for the first time he felt a tiny thread of hope, that moving forward, even slowly, was possible. Vin's voice was barely above a whisper. "Am I broken?" Billy's chest tightened, he shook his head gently. "No, sweetheart, you have trauma." Vin swallowed hard, tears spilling over. I just want this to stop." His body curled inward as he began to weep, the kind of crying that comes from being exhausted rather than loud. Billy wrapped his arms around him without hesitation. "I know," Billy said softly, "I know you do." Max stood a few steps away, fists clenched, jaw tight as he watched Vin break down. His voice came out strained. "If I ever see Ben or David again, I don't know how I'll keep myself together." John turned to him immediately. "Max, we feel the same way, every one of us does, but we can't go there." Max dragged a hand down his face, breathing hard. I know, I can't stand seeing Vin like this, it makes me so angry." John nodded slowly. "Same, seeing him hurt like this, it messes with you, but the best way we protect him now is staying here, being steady, not letting them take anything else from him." Billy looked up at Max, calm but firm. "Your anger makes sense, but Vin doesn't need vengeance, he needs safety, time, and people who don't leave." Max's shoulders sagged a little. "Yeah, you're right." Vin's crying slowed, his breathing uneven but easing as Billy held him. "I'm tired," Vin whispered. "I don't want to be strong today." Billy pressed his forehead gently to Vin's. "Then don't be, we'll carry it for you today." The room went quiet, not empty but held, no fixes, no promises that it would disappear overnight. Just people staying. And sometimes, that was enough to get through the moment. A few days later, the house was finally quiet again after the long trip back from Jamaica. Suitcases were half unpacked. the air still smelled faintly like sunscreen and salt. John stood in the hallway, jaw tight, hands clenched like he'd already made the decision. "Max," he said. Max looked up from the couch. "Yeah, John." John took a breath. "I changed my mind. I'm going to see David right now. Are you coming?" Max's posture stiffened immediately. "Does Vin know?" John shook his head. "No, Mom and Dad know. Link does too, but Vin no." Max stood slowly, eyes narrowing, not angry but worried. That's not a small thing to keep from him. "I know," John said quickly, "but that's why I'm doing it. I don't want Vin carrying this. I just need answers. I need to look him in the eye and say what he did." Max ran a hand over his face. "John, you can't go in there heated, not like this." "I'm not going to hurt him," John snapped, then caught himself. His voice dropped. "I swear, I just need closure, something the court didn't give." Max studied him for a long moment. "If I come, it's not to back you up if this goes sideways, it's to stop it from going sideways." John nodded immediately. "That's fair." "And this stays legal," Max added firmly. "Public place, recorded if possible, no yelling, no threats. The second it gets out of control, we leave." John exhaled, agreed. Max hesitated, then sighed. "All right, I'll come, but when we get back, we tell Vin no secrets. He deserves that much." John swallowed. "Yeah, he does." They grabbed their keys, the weight of the choice settling heavy on both of them. Behind them, the house stayed quiet. Vin didn't know yet. And that made what they were about to do feel even heavier. Max slowed the car as the building came into view. "John, why are we at a group home?" John didn't take his eyes off the entrance. "Because he's in prison here." Max frowned. "For the care he needs." "Yes," John said quietly. They stepped inside, the smell of disinfectant sharp in the air. A nurse at the desk looked up. "Who are you here to see?" John didn't miss a beat. "I'm Daisy McGrath's lawyer. I didn't have childcare today." The nurse glanced at Max. "He looks like he can take care of himself." John nodded calmly. "He looks okay, but he has a brain injury." Max caught on instantly. "Dad, I had an accident in my pull-up." John winced. "Please tell me you just wet it." Max muttered, "No mess." The nurse's expression softened immediately. "That's okay, you can use the bathroom down the hall, there's a changing table and the lift will help." "Thank you," John said, relieved. As they walked into the guest area, Max leaned in, voice low. "You owe me one, and we're never talking about that again." John whispered back, "Agreed." The nurse's voice came through the door behind them. "When you're done with your son, just head to the visitor room. Daisy will meet you there." "Thanks," John called back. "We're potty training, some days are just bad days." "That makes sense," the nurse replied. Max leaned closer, barely audible. "For real." John shot him a look. "You really said you messed yourself just to shut her up?" Max shrugged. "Worked, didn't it?" John sighed. "Let's just get this over with." They headed down the hall toward the visitor room, the lie holding for now. David smiled when he saw them, leaning back in his chair like this was a casual visit. "John, Max," he said lightly, "how was Jamaica, the trip I paid for but didn't get to go on?" John didn't sit. "Why did you backstab Vin?" David's smile twitched just slightly. Max stepped in fast. "Why was the IQ test doctored?" David sighed like they were inconveniencing him. "Vin knows you two are here." John's eyes hardened. "No, he doesn't. Now answer the question, the test." David folded his hands. "John, you were right there when I told Vin, but I'll tell you again." He shrugged. "Vin's family, John and Alan, were paying me a lot." Max stared at him. "So you sold him out?" "I provided what was requested," David replied smoothly. "Families want answers, control, stability." John's voice dropped, dangerous and quiet. "You labeled him broken so you could cash checks." David tilted his head. "I gave them what they believed." Max took a step forward. "You ruined his life." David scoffed. "I redirected it." "That was it." Max snapped. "You are an absolute ass." David laughed softly, unfazed. "Careful, you're in my facility, cameras everywhere." John finally sat down, slow and deliberate. "Good, because this conversation doesn't end here." David's smile faded. "You think you're heroes, but Vin survived because people like me made decisions." John leaned forward. "No, Vin survived despite you." For the first time, David didn't have a response. The room felt smaller, heavier. And somewhere far away, Vin was still asleep, unaware that the truth was finally being spoken out loud. David leaned back, eyes cold now. The smugness was gone, replaced with certainty. Vin was unavailable to talk before I came into his life, David said. And Ben, and the others who knew Vin before he met your family, we decided your family wasn't good enough to take care of him. John's hands curled into fists. Liam was at our house every day. David nodded, because he didn't trust you with Vin. Max sucked in a sharp breath. And Ed didn't trust you either, David continued. He'd only just joined, but even he could see it. John's voice shook, not loud but deadly calm. So that's why the lies, the gaslighting, the isolation. David didn't deny it. And the kidnapping of Vin, John finished. David looked him dead in the eye. Yeah. The word hit the room like a gunshot. Max stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. Do you hear yourself? David shrugged. We believed we were acting in his best interest. You trafficked him, John snapped. You stripped him of his name, you rewrote his mind, you drugged him, you locked him away from everyone who loved him. David's lips pressed into a thin line. He was compliant. That was it. John stood. You just admitted to conspiracy, falsifying medical records, and kidnapping a disabled adult. David's eyes flicked, just once, to the corner of the room. Cameras. Max noticed too. Say it again, he said quietly, louder. David stiffened. This conversation is over. No, John said, pulling out his phone and holding it up. It's actually just beginning. David stood abruptly. You need to leave. John didn't move. Vin thought he was broken because of you. Silence. For years, John continued, he wakes up screaming because of you. He still asks if he's broken. David swallowed. Max's voice cracked, not angry now, just raw. You don't get to decide who deserves a family. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Staff were coming. John leaned in one last time. You don't own him, you never did, and this time you said it out loud. David said nothing. The door opened. And the truth finally was no longer buried. David's face twisted with panic as he looked past John. He's not my lawyer, David shouted toward the door. That guy is not my lawyer. The nurse stepped fully into the room now, posture firm, voice clipped and professional. Sir, you need to lower your voice. He lied to get in here, David snapped, slamming his hand against the armrest of his wheelchair. The nurse didn't flinch. That doesn't change what happens next. She turned her attention to John and Max. You and your son need to leave the room, now. John nodded immediately, understood. Max leaned close to John as they stepped back. He's scared. John replied quietly, good. David wheeled himself forward, agitated, movements jerky. You can't just throw me out, I'm a resident here. And you're also under supervised status, the nurse said sharply, which means you don't get to yell at staff or visitors. David glared at her. They provoked me. The nurse met his eyes without hesitation. You confessed to serious allegations in front of witnesses. This visit is over. She gestured toward the door. Now. David's breathing was shallow, uneven. For the first time he looked small in the chair, trapped not by the wheelchair but by his own words. John paused at the doorway and looked back. You said it yourself, he said calmly. We didn't put the words in your mouth. David said nothing. The nurse pressed a button on the wall. Security to visitor room 3. As John and Max stepped into the hallway, the door closed behind them with a heavy click. Max exhaled hard. We got it, didn't we? John nodded. Yeah, we did. Down the hall, David's raised voice echoed once more, then cut off. And for the first time since this began, the truth wasn't just something Vin carried alone. It was documented, witnessed, and no longer buried. John put the phone on speaker as they stepped outside, the door clicking shut behind them. Mom, Dad, John said, we got answers. There was a pause on the line, then Billy's voice careful. What happened? Max ran a hand through his hair. Everyone who knew Vin before he found us, they didn't trust our family. Silence. Sam finally spoke, her voice tight. What do you mean, didn't trust us? John swallowed. David said it outright. Him, Ben, Liam, even Ed, they decided we weren't good enough to take care of Vin. Billy exhaled slowly. So they lied. Yes, John said, they gaslit him, doctored records, isolated him, and his voice caught. David admitted it. He admitted to the kidnapping. Sam let out a shaky breath. Oh my God. Max added he said it like it was nothing, like they were doing Vin a favor. Billy's voice hardened in a way Max had never heard before. Did you get proof? John nodded even though they couldn't see him. Cameras, staff, witnesses. He panicked and yelled when he realized what he said. Another pause, then Sam, quieter now. Does Vin know? No, John said immediately, and we're not telling him like this, not yet. Billy agreed. Good, he doesn't need the details, he needs safety. Max looked back at the building. They took his name, his confidence made him think he was broken. Sam's voice cracked. He asked me that if he was broken. John closed his eyes. He's not, but they made damn sure he felt like he was. Billy took a steadying breath. You did the right thing going there. Max added, we didn't touch him, we didn't threaten him, we just let him talk. Billy said quietly, that's how the truth finally comes out. Sam sniffed, come home, both of you. We're on our way, John said. As the call ended, Max looked at John. You know this doesn't fix everything. John nodded, no, but it changes the ending. They got into the car. And for the first time since Vin had asked, am I broken, there was an answer that didn't come from fear or lies, but from the truth finally stepping into the light. Vin's voice came from the hallway, quiet but steady. Mom, Dad. Sam turned so fast the phone nearly slipped from her hand. Vin, we thought you were asleep. Vin rolled a little farther into the room, his face pale, eyes tired. My leg pain woke me up, I heard you talking to John and Max. Billy's shoulders dropped. Vin. Vin swallowed. Did I just hear that no one from my old life trusted you guys, that they said you weren't good enough? The room went still. Sam crossed to him immediately and knelt so they were eye level. Honey, they said that, yes. Vin's hands curled into the blanket. Did you know? No, Billy said firmly, we didn't, not then, not ever. Vin's voice wavered, so all that time it wasn't because you didn't want me. Sam shook her head, tears already falling. Never, not for a second. Billy spoke slowly, carefully. They made decisions about you without you, and they blamed us to justify it. Vin stared at the floor. I thought maybe I was too much, that I made things harder. Sam reached for his hands. You were never too much, you were a child who needed help, and we loved you the moment you were in our lives. Vin blinked hard. Then why does it still feel like I failed everyone? Billy's voice broke. Because trauma lies, it tells you the hurt was your fault so the people who caused it don't have to carry it. Vin breathed shakily. They really didn't trust you. No, Sam said softly, and that says everything about them, not you and not us. Vin nodded once slowly. I just needed to hear it out loud. Billy leaned in. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. Vin looked up at them. I'm tired of being scared. Sam brushed his hair back gently. Then we'll move forward at your pace, together. Vin closed his eyes for a moment, then whispered, okay. And for the first time that night, the room didn't feel so heavy, just quiet, honest, and safe enough to breathe. The front door opened and John and Max stepped inside. The familiar scent of home and the soft light made the chaos of the past feel distant, almost. Sam met them in the hallway, voice gentle but firm. Vin, he overheard us talking. He wants to talk with everybody and especially with you too. John exchanged a glance with Max. All right, he said softly, we're ready. They found Vin sitting near the window, legs tucked under him, eyes fixed on the garden outside. He turned slowly when he saw them. I heard everything, Vin said quietly. I want to know from all of you the truth, especially you, John, Max, I need to hear it from you. Max swallowed, nodding. We're here, Vin, whatever you want to know we'll tell you. John moved closer, careful not to crowd him. I'm listening, Vin, you lead this conversation. Vin took a deep breath. All the lies, the gaslighting, everything David and Ben did you know any of it before I came to you? John's jaw tightened. No, we didn't, not a word, and we had no idea about the IQ tests, the manipulation, or the things they said about you. Max's voice was steady but raw. We only found out what they did when we went there, and when we did it, we recorded it. We didn't touch him, didn't threaten him, we just let the truth come out. Vin's eyes filled with tears. So, all this time you weren't lying, you weren't trying to hurt me. Sam's voice cracked. Never, Vin, we've always wanted to protect you, that's all, you've been through enough. Vin wiped at his eyes. I just want to move on, I'm tired of nightmares, I'm tired of thinking I'm broken. John and Max exchanged a look. Then we'll move forward, John said. Step by step, you're not alone, Vin, we're here, we never left. Max nodded firmly, and no one ever going to take that away from you again. Vin took a shaky breath, then leaned back slightly, the weight of fear lifting just a little. Okay, let's start over, I want to start over. Billy and Sam smiled softly, relief washing over them. The family was finally together, honest, safe, and ready to heal. Vin looked at both of them, brows pulled together, not angry, just tired. You two are dumb, he said flatly. Max blinked, wow. Vin pointed at him. Max, you're a teenager, I know you care about me and I love you for that, but be a kid, you shouldn't be carrying this like it's your job. Max dropped his eyes. I just didn't want you hurt. I know, Vin said more gently, but that doesn't mean you have to grow up faster than you already have. Then Vin turned to John. And you, why? John didn't dodge it. Because I wanted more answers to give you, I didn't want you stuck with half-truths. Vin nodded slowly. I get that, I really do. He took a breath, steadying himself. But listen to me, if you don't tell me something that involves me, that I'm the main person in and I find out later. The room went still. I will be pissed, Vin said calmly, because my whole life people made choices for me and kept me in the dark. The IQ test, the doctors, the caregivers, all of it. He looked around the room at Sam, at Billy. This goes for you too, Mom and Dad. Sam's eyes filled. Vin. No, Vin said, not harshly, just firm. I'm not a child you have to protect from the truth, I'm the one who lived it, I need to know what's happening with my life. Billy nodded slowly. You're right. John swallowed. You're right. Max looked up. Yeah, you are. Vin's shoulders finally relaxed a little. I don't need every detail, but I need honesty, and I need to be asked, not decided for. Sam stepped closer. We can do that. Vin exhaled. Good, because I want to heal, and I can't do that if I'm always finding out things after the fact. John met his eyes. From now on you're in the room every time. Max added quietly, no more secrets. Vin nodded once. That's all I wanted. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was respectful. And for the first time, the truth wasn't something being handed to Vin, it was something he was finally allowed to hold himself.